Hello there. So, welcome to Wade's year by year flashback of 2011. And this is basically part two. It's been since September of 2018 since I've done anything like this. So, anyway, I'm going over the portion that goes from May to December of 2011. And then I'm going to make a follow up video of the deaths that occurred in 2011. Not literally every human death, but, certain notable people who died in 2011. And by notable, I mean people that I've heard of. But anyway, I'm going to consult Wikipedia here, and I will make some sparse commentary on certain events that happened in 2011. So anyway, on May 1st, U.S. President Barack Obama announces that Osama bin Laden, the founder and leader of the militant group Al Qaeda, was killed on May 2nd, 2011, and during an American military operation in Pakistan. Huh. So apparently that happened overnight, according to the wording of this particular entry, because it says May 1st there, and then it says May 2nd. But anyway, Osama bin Laden was obviously a pretty prominent figure in the news. And when Obama, spearheaded some operation to have him killed, it was definitely making big headlines at the time. Definitely remember that. And I remember it partly due to Key and Peele creating some funny commentary about it. In their little anger translator sketches when Obama and Mitt Romney were basically debating and having their stupid campaigns and all that. And one of the points that Key and Peele raised was that if a Republican had killed Osama bin Laden, they would just be celebrating it like there's no tomorrow. They would basically treat it like it was the greatest event ever. But because it was Barack Obama who was president at the time, they basically didn't give a shit. And I remember that as basically being true. And it really showed the just ridiculous nature of partisan politics, how these political parties just stubbornly refuse to give each other credit for anything, even something that was kind of a major event like that. Now, I'm not going to say, that it was a travesty or anything. It was because for one thing, it was kind of a predictable outcome that the Republicans would act like that. But at the same time, it was definitely on the stupid side. But anyway, let's move on to May 16th. The European Union agrees to a 78 billion rescue deal for Portugal. The bailout loan will be equally split between the European Financial Stabilization Mechanism, the European Financial Stability Facility, and the International Monetary Fund. Now, I've heard some very bad things about the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, and I just kind of don't trust these international monetary organizations or major banks. I've always, been practical when it comes to that kind of stuff. I don't trust greedy people with tons of money to always do the right thing. Does that mean they never could do the right thing? No. I mean, they certainly could, but they most often don't. Anyway, May 21st, Grimsvötn, Iceland's most active volcano, erupts and causes a disruption to air travel in northwestern Europe. So basically, you have another natural disaster. In this case, it's a volcano that I have a hard time pronouncing. Anyway, moving on to May 22nd, you have another natural disaster, the 2011 Joplin tornado, an EF5 tornado strikes Joplin, Missouri, killing 158 and injuring 1,150 people. And, you may have had some farm animals injured and whatnot, and property destroyed and all that. I definitely remember the Joplin tornado. It was also big in the news at the time. And yeah, 158 people. That's quite a bit of. I'm trying to remember how wide that tornado was because I know there was one that was like maybe like 2 miles wide, and that's. I mean, when you're just talking about something like that, it kind of goes over people's heads. Just how massive and freakish that is. But if you really stop and think about it, like a tornado that's like even a mile wide, that's pretty epic. I mean, that'd be a freaky thing to see. And I have to admit, I've always wanted to actually see a tornado, but it's kind of a weird thing to admit because you're kind of wishing for something that could create death and destruction. But at the same time, they're like these beautiful things, generally speaking. Um, I mean, yes, they're terrible and ugly and destructive, but there's an undeniable, beautiful, majestic quality to seeing that funnel going up in the air. It's like it's definitely like the whole yin and yang kind of thing about the universe. Some things can be hideous yet also beautiful at the same time. Anyway, moving on to May 26th, former Bosnian Serb army commander Ratko Mladic. Well, his name almost looks like it says melodic. But anyway, he was wanted for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, and he was arrested in Serbia. And yet again, that's another. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm a genocide denier or anything, but it seems like all these countries could be accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity. That is, any crimes that happened during a wartime. I mean, what isn't genocide? I mean, if you're killing a bunch of civilians in bombing campaigns, I'm pretty sure you could actually consider that at least borderline genocide. I mean, sure, it's not as systematic maybe as some people would like, but you're definitely intentionally bombing major cities and whatnot. So you're kind of willfully creating death and destruction, and uh, obviously helping to trigger some fallout from all that. So it's, I mean, I'm sure this Rotko guy was definitely bad. I'm not saying he wasn't, but you could put so many different politicians in prison, or hang them for war crimes, or any number of things. That's all I'm saying there. Anyway, moving on to June 4th, Chile's Puyehu volcano erupts, causing air traffic cancellations across South America, New Zealand, and Australia, and forcing over 3,000 people to evacuate. Whew, yet another natural disaster. June 26th through July 17th, the 2011 FIFA Women's World Cup takes place in Germany and is won by Japan. Well, good for them. Don't really have much comment on that. June 28th, the Food and Agriculture Organization announces the eradication of the cattle plague Rinderpest from the world. Wow, a cattle plague. That's a cool sounding name too, Rinderpest. Rinderpest. It's definitely like a good metal band name. Anyway, moving on to July. July 9th, South Sudan secedes from Sudan per the result of the independence referendum held in January. July 12th, the planet Neptune completes its first solar orbit since it was discovered in 1846. Interesting. July 14th, South Sudan joins the United Nations as the 193rd member. July 20th, Goran Hadzik is detained in Serbia, becoming the last of 161 people indicted by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. And obviously, you can refer to my previous commentary on that one. I mean, a bunch of politicians are war criminals. Yeah, I mean, that's just the way it is. Some of them get recognized as such, others don't. It kind of depends on who's most popular at the time, even more than whatever crimes they committed. Beyond that, the United Nations declares a famine in southern Somalia, the first in over 30 years. Does that mean the first famine in the world in 30 years, or the first famine in Somalia in 30 years? I mean, if Somalia can only go like 30 years without a famine, that's definitely not a good situation. And July 21st, the space shuttle Atlantis lands successfully at Kennedy Space Center after completing STS-135, concluding NASA's space shuttle program. Anyway, on July 22nd, in Norway, Anders Behring Breivik kills 8 people in a bomb blast which targeted government buildings in central Oslo, then kills 69 at a massacre at a workers' youth league camp on the island of Utoya. Now I remember that doofus. Yeah, he wrote like a manifesto and, thought he was going to improve the world by doing that. Little bit of advice to people in general. Stop believing you're going to really improve the world by randomly killing a bunch of people. It's probably not going to happen that way. Just a little bit of a hint for you. In July 31st, 2011, in Thailand, over 12.8 million people are affected by severe flooding. The World Bank estimates damages at 1,444 billion baht. That's in US dollars, that's 45 billion. Some areas are still 6 feet underwater, and many factory areas remain closed at the end of the year. 815 people are killed, with 58 of the country's 77 provinces affected. That's actually, yeah. I remember that, but I mean, it's like a little bit of a memory boost for me reading that. In August, stock exchanges worldwide suffer heavy losses due to the fears of contagion of the European sovereign debt crisis and the credit rating downgraded as a result of the debt ceiling crisis of the United States. I remember that debt ceiling stuff. It's all just like made up stuff, people, Like all these crises that are just coming out of nowhere because people couldn't find a better way to do things, basically. I mean, that's kind of it sounds like I'm being stupid with a summary like that, but that kind of is true. You know what I mean? Like and with all these natural disasters and stuff happening, like people, we really don't need all these additional crises on top of that kind of stuff. But obviously we like to create panics of one sort or another because heaven forbid we have a cool and rational and level-headed and fair approach to the economy or, resources and decision-making. In August 5th, NASA announces that its Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter has captured photographic evidence of possible liquid water on Mars during warm seasons. I remember that, definitely. I guess that's kind of a story, but, I guess the possibility of water on any planet isn't really that amazing to me because water's, it's a pretty common substance here on Earth. So, I mean, yeah, it's kind of impressive, but whatever. Juno, the first solar-powered spacecraft on a mission to Jupiter, is launched from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Then, August 20th through 28th, Libyan rebels take control of the capital, Tripoli, effectively overthrowing the government of Muammar Gaddafi. Yep, I remember Wacky Gaddafi getting killed myself, and that's basically what happened. I'm surprised. Yeah, They didn't really mention his death here, but I know he died as a result of that. So maybe just a little bit of an oversight for this Wikipedia article. Anyway, September now. September 5th, India and Bangladesh sign a pact to end their 40-year border demarcation dispute. And yet again, borders are something that people make up. Just another made up problem, you know? It's like you can't get over these disputes because you keep on making them up in your own mind. That's kind of how that shit works, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm like 37 years old. I still haven't heard a compelling argument that all this border stuff is actually like valid, because it really is just a bunch of made up gibberish, as far as I'm concerned. Like nationalism is stupid, no matter who does it, and countries are just a bunch of bullshit when it comes down to it. I mean, sounds like an oversimplification, but it's kind of not. So September 10th, the MV Spice Islander 1, carrying at least 800 people, sinks off the coast of Zanzibar, killing 240 people. Tragic. September 12th, approximately 100 people die after a petrol pipeline explodes in Nairobi. Now, that must be a Brit who wrote that, because petrol is not something standardly said in American English. I mean, whatever, it's just a minor commentary. But, yeah. Pipeline accidents happen. I've also heard that some people deliberately sabotage those things. I don't know if that was the case there, but I've heard about that happening in places like Nigeria. I've read about that before. And in September 17th, Occupy Wall Street protests begin in the United States. This develops into the Occupy movement, which spreads to 82 countries by October. Now, I definitely remember the Occupy Wall Street stuff, and I think most people kind of had this habit of just discrediting every aspect of it, and I think it pissed off the left a lot, honestly, back then, because like the news media just wasn't taking it seriously, and basically it was an example of the left and their inability to really effectively organize, aside from like symbolic gestures. And it kind of became co-opted by Democrats at the time, and that also weakened it. But I always remember Occupy Wall Street as something that really had potential, but just, it was just stifled because people just don't want to create alternatives to the status quo. They'll complain about it endlessly, but they won't really take effective steps to creating alternative institutions or, developing a meaningful relationship with other people within the movement. That's the way I see it. And you can interpret that a lot of ways, like what I mean by the Occupy movement or whatever. I mean, it was kind of an amorphous thing. There was no real concrete goal, which by itself makes it sound like it's easy to discredit, but at the same time, it still had potential, but it was squandered, basically. Anyway, in September 19th, with 434 dead, the United Nations launches a $357 million appeal for victims of the 2011 Sindh floods in Pakistan. Moving on to October. October 4th, the death toll from the flooding of Cambodia's Mekong River and attendant flash floods reaches 207. And October 18th, Gilad Shalit prisoner exchange. Israel and the Palestinian militant organization Hamas begin a major prisoner exchange in which the captured Israeli army soldier Gilad Shalit is released by Hamas in exchange for 1,027 Palestinian and Israeli Arab prisoners held in Israel, including 280 prisoners serving life sentences for planning and perpetrating terror attacks. So I mean, it's always rough commenting on something like this because I mean you're dealing with terror attacks and then you're dealing with a country like Israel occupying another territory. It's hard to say that without getting something that's offensive to someone. So basically, my commentary on that is going to just not exist for right now. I'm going to play the chicken route. I'm going to be a coward on this one and not really offer much further comment. On October 20th, Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi is killed he's killed anyway. I'm not going to try to pronounce where he was killed. The National Transitional Council forces taking control of the city and ending the war. Okay, so like I said, Muammar Gaddafi died in 2011. And this, I guess he wasn't killed instantly. I thought he was, but apparently wasn't. Anyway, Basque separatist militant organization ETA declares an end to its 43-year campaign of political violence, which has killed over 800 people since 1968. So yeah, I mean, just more violence. But apparently they declared that they're going to stop. I don't know if that actually stuck or not. I haven't really been following the news as much as I did in the past. But apparently it stopped for a moment anyway. On October 23rd, a magnitude 7.2 earthquake jolts eastern Turkey near the city of Van, killing over 600 people and damaging about 2,200 buildings. And in October 27th, after an emergency meeting in Brussels, the European Union announces an agreement to tackle the European sovereign debt crisis, which includes a write-down of 50% of Greek bonds, a recapitalization of European banks, and an increase of the bailout fund of the European Financial Stability Facility, totaling in 1 trillion euros, I believe. Okay. October 31st, Halloween. It's the date selected by the UN as a symbolic date when global population reaches 7 billion. Now that is spooky. 7 billion people on Earth. Ooh. I mean, they're not all bad, but definitely some of them are. That's 7 billion. 7 billion. 7 billion. UNESCO admits UNESCO admits Palestine as a member following a vote which 107 member states support and 14 oppose. Gee, I wonder who might have opposed that one. Anyway, November 26th, the Mars Science Laboratory rover Curiosity, the most elaborate Martian exploration vehicle to date, is launched from the Kennedy Space Center. It lands on Mars on August 6, 2012. Well, see, that's kind of cute news. All right. I'm not going to trash talk that little story that much. On November 30th, the United Kingdom severs diplomatic relations with Iran and expels diplomats, less than 24 hours after protesters attack the British embassy in Tehran. Yeah, more nonsense going on. More problems people are kind of creating. Maybe not out of nowhere, but, it's this inability people have of, living and let living. That's going to basically be my comment on a lot of these stories when it comes to this kind of stuff because, people can even take a good idea and make it look like the worst idea of all time. And they can obviously take a bad idea and make it seem like the end of the world. Anyway, December 15th, the United States formally declares an end to the Iraq War. While this ends the insurgency, it begins another. Yeah, I think the United States really screwed up the country of Iraq. Like, I mean, you can say what you want. Like, maybe you're one of those weirdos who thinks it was a good idea, but I, I, I obviously have something right when I'm criticizing it because it really just was disastrous. By just about any practical standard, it was screwed up, and the insurgency is obviously part of that, or was, and you obviously, well, let's just put it this way: before the second Gulf War happened, before Bush came in and wrecked the place even further, there were not all these people running around, bombing stuff and shooting at each other. I mean, you might have had some violence, but not nearly to that degree. Anyway, December 16th, Tropical Storm Washi causes 1,268 flash flood fatalities in the Philippines, with 85 people officially listed as missing. Yep, a lot of natural disasters in 2011. Probably more than on some other years. And December 29th, Samoa and Tokelau moved from east to west of the international dateline, thereby skipping December 30 in order to align their time zones better with their main trading partners. Huh. Well, that about does it for the year 2011. Um, in its ordinary recap, I am going to go over the deaths that happened in this year, too. So, anyway, yeah.